Hello everyone, I'm Zira. Today is April 27, 2021. I welcome you all to the virtual school. I'm happy to present you today's news. News articles are from today's Hindu newspaper. So stay tuned and here we go. Front page. MHA advises states to impose locally at 14-day lockdowns guidelines issued, ban on all events and gatherings. Waiting for a relief. A patient on oxygen waiting to be admitted to Lok Nayak Hospital in Delhi on Monday. Sushil Kumar Verma, Special Correspondent, New Delhi. The Ministry of Home Affairs, MHA, has asked the states to impose localized restrictions and implement strict containment measures for at least 14 days to flatten the COVID-19 curve. In a letter to the states on Monday, Union Home Secretary Ajay Kumar Bhalla said that considering the unprecedented surge, there is an urgent need for the states and the union territories to consider strict COVID-19 management and control measures to bring the situation under control. States and U.T.S., based on their assessment of the situation, may impose local restrictions at district/subdistrict and city/ward level, with a view to contain the spread of COVID-19, the letter stated. Over the past 7 days, new COVID-19 cases averaged around 3.2 lakh daily. The letter said that the Union Health Ministry on April 25 had advised all the states to implement an intensive, local, and focused containment framework, and the criteria was shared. In the recent past, a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases has been observed along with high positivity rate. Considering this unprecedented surge, there is an urgent need for states/UTs to consider strict COVID management and control measures in the surge areas to bring the situation under control, the letter stated. The Health Ministry had suggested night curfew, closure of malls, shopping complexes, and restricting office strength to 50% as some of the measures to contain the spread in areas that required intensive action. The spread of the infection has to be controlled through restricting the intermingling amongst people, the only known host for the COVID-19 virus, the ministry said. Daily cases may hit 4.4 lakh by May 8, predicts IIT model. Active infections may peak at 48 lakh. Press Trust of India, New Delhi. Active cases in the ongoing second COVID-19 wave in India may peak at 38 to 48 lakh between May 14 and 18, and daily new infections could hit a high of 4.4 lakh from May 4 to 8, according to a mathematical model by IIT scientists, who have revised their projections upwards. The scientists from IIT Kanpur and Hyderabad applied the susceptible, undetected, tested, positive, and removed approach, Sutra, model to predict that active cases would go up by over 10 lakh by mid-May. The latest projection tweaks the time frame and numbers. Last week, the researchers predicted the pandemic may peak between May 11 and 15 with 33 to 35 lakh active cases and decline steeply by the end of May. Earlier this month, their model projected that active infections would peak by April 15, which didn't come true. This time, I have also computed minimum and maximum for predicted values. I am reasonably confident that the actual values will be within the values mentioned, Maninder Agrawal, professor at the Department of Computer Science and Engineering, IIT Kanpur, told PTI. Nomadland wins big at Pandemic Oscars. Chloe Zhao makes history as first woman of color to get Best Director award. Winners, the team of Nomadland poses at the press room of the Oscars, in Los Angeles, California, on Sunday. Reuters pool. Agents France Presse Hollywood. U.S. road movie Nomadland emerged as the big winner at the Oscars on Sunday with 3 major prizes, including a history-making award for director Chloe Zhao, as Hollywood celebrated its most glamorous night with a unique pandemic-era gala. Ms. Zhao's drama about marginalist Americans roaming the West in vans was honored for Best Picture, Director, and Actress for Frances McDormand, who now is in elite company with her 3rd Academy Award. No-show Anthony Hopkins pulled an upset to win Best Actor in the final award of the night, besting sentimental favorite Chadwick Boseman, who died of cancer last year. The unorthodox Oscars ceremony was moved from a Hollywood theater to a glammed-up downtown train station to abide by COVID-19 protocols, and reunited Tinseltown A-listers for the first time in over a year. Ms. Zhao, who is the first woman of color ever honored as Best Director, thanked all the people we met on the road, for teaching us the power of resilience and hope, and for reminding us what true kindness looks like. She is also only the second woman to win Best Director after Kathryn Bigelow, who broke the glass ceiling in 2010 when she won the prize for The Hurt Locker. "It's pretty fabulous to be a woman in 2021, Ms. Zhao told journalists at a virtual backstage Q&A, adding, "If this win means more people get to live their dreams, I'm extremely grateful." With movie theaters closed all year and blockbuster content delayed, Beijing-born Zhao's film captured the pandemic zeitgeist with its stunning portrait of the isolated margins of society. Mr. Hopkins' win at 83 for his shattering portrayal of a dementia sufferer in The Father makes him the oldest actor to win a competitive Oscar in history. Best Supporting Actress went to Yun Ye-yoon for the Korean immigrant drama Minari. Thank you. Editorial 1. Unfair and dangerous vaccine inequity will make containment measures more difficult. In the midst of a raging second wave, which is touching new peaks each passing day, the central government has abdicated its responsibility to ensure vaccine equity through free vaccination for the poor across all age groups. While state governments were never consulted or given prior notice about the change in vaccination policy, giving the two vaccine manufacturers a free hand to decide the price at which vaccines will be sold to state governments has made universal COVID-19 vaccination a difficult task to achieve. A large percentage of those aged 18 to 44 years does not have the resources to pay for vaccines and hence will fall through the cracks. So, the states will have to take a leading role in the free immunization program. While nearly 24 states have already committed to vaccinate for free the target population, it remains to be seen if they use any criteria to identify the beneficiaries. Never before has universal immunization of nearly 600 million people been left to state governments and the private sector, while the union government restricts itself to vaccinating for free just 300 million. With this precedent, states will probably be required to vaccinate children too, when vaccines become available, thus burdening them even further and thereby actively promoting vaccine inequity. If making states pay for vaccines is an ill-conceived idea, forcing them to shell out more than what the union government pays for the same vaccines is a sure recipe for exacerbated vaccine inequity. With vaccination being the only safe way to end the pandemic, undertaking any exercise that leaves a large population unprotected will cost the country enormously in terms of lives and livelihoods. While the union government has already allocated 35,000 Indian rupees crore for COVID-19 vaccination in this budget and also committed to provide further funds if required, it will spend less than 10,000 Indian rupees crore to vaccinate for free all above 45 years. While the sudden change in policy is therefore not due to lack of financial resources, the state governments, which have not factored in funds for vaccination, will now be required to garner funds for the same. There is hence a great compulsion to make pricing more transparent and allow states to collectively bargain for a lower price and assured timelines to receive supplies. The current policy, which has earmarked 50% supplies to state governments and private hospitals, takes the states and the companies to a completely uncharted territory, leading to competition among states, and between state governments and private hospitals. Vaccine shortage from both manufacturers is likely to last a few months. The combination of policy pandemonium, profiteering by vaccine manufacturers in the thick of the pandemic, and vaccine shortage is unlikely to result in a smooth rollout of vaccines for the target group. This could lead to a dangerous situation where containment and mitigation measures become even more difficult. A stream of awards Oscars this year saw many firsts, and also a fair amount of continuity and predictability. After last year's Oscar sweep by Parasite, there were those who peddled the myth that lightning will not strike the same place twice. It kind of did in the 93rd Academy Awards, when the Best Supporting Actress award went to South Korean Yun Ye-yoon, for her role as Granny Soon-jae in the heartwarming Minari, beating off competition from Glenn Close's mad-haired Mama in Hillbilly Elegy. Anthony Hopkins winning his second Best Actor Oscar. He first won for The Silence of the Lambs, for The Father was disappointing, even if deserving. The sentimental favorite was the late Chadwick Boseman, who turned in an incendiary performance as the mercurial trumpeter, Levy Green, in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. As expected, Nomadland won big with Best Picture, Best Director for Chloe Zhao and Best Actress, Frances McDormand. It is a historic win for Zhao, as she is only the second woman to win the award and the first woman of color to do so. While elegiac in its beauty, Nomadland should have looked at privilege. Only a white person can feel safe enough to drop off the grid. Wandering white people, even if they are hulking ex-military policemen, are enlightened and definitely not lost, while a homeless black person will always be looked at with suspicion. In this year of pandemics and lockdowns, the old rules of movies playing for a certain amount of time in theaters to be considered for the awards was relaxed. Movies directly released on streaming platforms made the cut. David Fincher's Mank got 10 nominations and won 2 for cinematography and production design. Other favorites such as Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, Sound of Metal, Pieces of a Woman, Hillbilly Elegy, One Night in Miami and The Trial of the Chicago 7 were also streamed. One gem of a film was Two Distant Strangers, which won for Best Live Action Short. The film effectively marries two burning issues: violence against black Americans by white policemen and being caught in a time loop. Black graphic designer, Carter James, just wants to get back to his dog and he is shot every time by a white policeman, Merc. The film brings alive memories of police brutality at home as well. Every time Carter wakes up after being shot, to live the day again, it is a reminder of the year of Blur's days that passed by. One should, however, be thankful for Blur's days if one cannot distinguish one day from the next. It means nothing hideous happened to make the day stand out. That, in these days of shock and dread, is definitely something to be grateful for. Undermining vaccination for all. The new vaccine strategy raises questions, beginning with the center giving up its control over the market for vaccines. Getty Images. Al-Fayri/Getty Images. Just when the spread of COVID-19 has reached catastrophic proportions, with the daily caseload rising faster than that seen anywhere in the world since the beginning of the novel coronavirus pandemic, the government of India has acted by unveiling a completely revamped vaccine strategy. Two key elements are the hallmark of this new strategy, which will be implemented from May 1st. First, the phased rollout of the vaccination drive initiated on January 16, under which the vaccine-eligible sections of the population were gradually increased, has now been extended to the entire adult population, namely, to those above 18 years. Second, and more importantly, a significant deregulation of the vaccine market has been effected and vaccine manufacturers have the freedom to sell 50% of their vaccine production to state governments and private hospitals, and at prices that can be substantially higher than that hitherto fixed by the government. A third element of the vaccine strategy, which was not announced formally, is a grant of 45 billion Indian rupees to the two vaccine manufacturers, the Serum Institute of India, SII, and Bharat Biotech, to boost their capacities. Handing over the reins. The new vaccine strategy raises a number of questions, not the least from the manner in which the central government has given up its control over the market for vaccines, a key feature of the vaccine rollout plans thus far. This issue assumes further significance since the government of India is well aware, as all public authorities around the world are, about the significance of vaccinating every citizen in the country. None of us will be safe until everyone is safe. It is, therefore, vitally important that public health authorities in the country take an objective view of the realities of the country before adopting strategies for vaccine availability, for this is absolutely critical for resetting lives and livelihoods disrupted by the pandemic. Several facts suggest that this has not done while rejigging the extant vaccine strategy. Vaccine exports. The phased rollout of the government's ambitious vaccination drive, beginning with healthcare and frontline workers in January, followed by the gradual inclusion of senior citizens and people above 45 years in March and April, respectively, was in sync with the availability of vaccines in the country. Although SII, the largest vaccine producer, had initially promised to supply 100 million doses of vaccines a month, in reality it could provide between 50 million to 60 million doses. But, given that India too saw a degree of vaccine skepticism, the government of India found itself in a situation where it could promise exports of vaccines to 95 countries, mostly in Africa and Asia. As of April 26, these countries have received more than 66.4 million doses of vaccines from India. https://bit.ly/3eaverageYW. Until now, nearly 142 million vaccine doses have been administered in the country, the third highest in the world. However, in terms of population share, less than 2% has received both vaccine doses, while less than 9% has received one dose. https://bit.ly/3afvo8a But there is one worrying facet, which is that a demand-supply mismatch has begun to appear as the coverage of the vaccine-eligible population expanded. The largest supplier, SII, gave two explanations for its inability to meet its commitments. The first was that the United States government had used a Cold War piece of legislation, the Defense Production Act, to restrict exports of vaccine culture and other essential materials. Second, the company complained that it lacked the financial capacity to expand its production, requesting a grant of 30 billion Indian rupees from the government. https://bit.ly/2s8z3ib. Onus on states. It is the face of this vaccine supply crunch that the government has announced the new vaccine strategy, by opening vaccination to all adults in the country, and allowing vaccine producers to sell 50% of their production directly to state governments and private hospitals. The new strategy shifts the onus onto the state governments, which have to take decisions regarding free vaccination for people above 18 years, while the central government would continue to support vaccination for people above 45 years, and healthcare workers and frontline workers. The government has not fixed the vaccine prices and has allowed the producers to pre-declare the prices they would charge from the state governments and private hospitals, a sharp departure from the extant strategy. Thus far, government facilities have provided vaccines free of cost, while private facilities are allowed to charge no more than 250 Indian rupees per dose. The central government played the role of a sole procurement agency that helped in driving down prices, thus addressing the issue of affordable access to vaccines. However, the new strategy abandons this mechanism and fragments the market into three layers, namely, central government procurement, state government procurement and the private hospitals. This layering of the market would allow the producers to charge high prices from the state governments and private hospitals. In fact, both SII and Bharat Biotech have immediately announced their intentions to raise vaccine prices. SII will sell Covishield to state governments and private hospitals would have at 400 Indian rupees and 600 Indian rupees per dose, respectively. https://bit.ly/3gfcfmf, while the corresponding figures for Bharat Biotech's Covaxin are 600 Indian rupees and 1,200 Indian rupees per dose. https://bit.ly/3t1sb3j. The new strategy would shift the burden of vaccination of the young population, namely, those between 18 to 44 years, entirely on the state governments. This implies that the vaccination of a significant section of the population depends on the financial health of each state government, resulting in inequitable access to vaccines across states. Moreover, given their poor state of finances, most state governments may not be able to procure the required number of vaccine doses to meet the demands of the targeted population. In such a situation, a large share of the vaccine quota, 50% of domestic production, earmarked for the state governments and the private hospitals could end up with the latter. In the US, the decision to substantially deregulate the vaccine market raises serious questions in view of the reported advance of 45 billion Indian rupees made by the Government of India to the two vaccine producers in India for expanding their production capacities. https://bit.ly/3evfcr. The federal government in the United States has done similarly, providing financial support to vaccine producers, who are now set to rake in their billions by charging high prices. Several public interest groups in the U.S. have asked questions as to why the tax-paying public should bear the high prices of vaccines when federal taxes have been used to beef up the vaccine producers. This question is more pertinent in India, where access to affordable vaccines is critical for ensuring vaccination for all. More open licensing needed. It is somewhat ironic that the new vaccine strategy, which could undermine vaccination for all, comes from a country that has long championed the cause of access to affordable medicines in international forums. Rather than hand over the reins of price determination to the duopoly in the vaccine market, the government should have urgently addressed the serious doubts over affordability of vaccines by ensuring a competitive market for vaccines. According to recent estimates, existing producers in India will be unable to meet the country's vaccine requirements by some distance, and therefore, India needs more vaccine manufacturers to ensure uninterrupted supply. One positive step that the government has taken in this direction is to increase production of Bharat Biotech's vaccine through the involvement of 3 public sector undertakings, including Hafkind Institute. We would argue that there is a need for more open licensing of this vaccine to scale up production. This would enhance competition in the market, enabling the vaccines to reach every citizen in the country. Biswajit Thar is Professor, Center for Economic Studies and Planning, School of Social Sciences, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. K. M. Gopakumar is Legal Advisor, Third World Network, TWN. The views expressed are personal. Another wave spells more nutrition loss. The inability of those already on the brink of subsistence to absorb a second economic shock cannot be overlooked. Shivkumar Pushpakar. Karan Singhal, Advaita Rajendra and Ankur Saran. The political and social handling of the COVID-19 pandemic have added to the persisting issues of food insecurity faced by millions in India. Even prior to the novel coronavirus pandemic, India consistently has ranked poorly in all international rankings on hunger, ranking 102 among 117 countries in the Global Hunger Index 2019. With the second, more vigorous wave of COVID-19, the inability of those already on the brink of subsistence to absorb a second economic shock cannot be overlooked, even as the current health crisis is creating havoc. Rural distress specifically needs closer examination and urgent policy attention. Data collection, findings. The Rapid Rural Community Response, or RCRC, https://bit.ly/3etwsse, to COVID-19, a collective of over 60 non-governmental organizations has collected 3 rounds of data since the lockdown. The data provide crucial evidence of the nature and persistence of food and financial insecurity among the poor residing in rural areas. The third round, conducted between December 2020 to January 2021, has collected data from 11,766 households across 64 districts in Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Gujarat, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Odisha, Rajasthan, Telangana, and Uttar Pradesh. Cutting down on food. The most recent data suggest a persistence of cutting down on food even 9 months after the first lockdown, during the seeming revival period. While 40% of the sample cut down on food during the first lockdown, an alarming 25% reportedly continued to cut down on food during the most recent survey conducted between December and January 2021. Households reported cutting down on nutritious food. 80% cut down on milk, vegetables, pulses and oil. Around 50% reported cutting down on pulses alone. Disaggregating the figure, we find that the poorer, socially marginalized Dalits, and those with lesser access to food security schemes, such as migrants, faced more severe food insecurity. Comparing similar households, we find households in Uttar Pradesh and Jharkhand were faring among the worst performing states. These reductions will undoubtedly further accelerate the impending effects on children's nutrition, as highlighted in the National Family Health Survey, or NFHSV, 2019-20, and the Global Food Policy Report, 2021. The loss in nutrition may have come as a consequence of people losing their jobs or being pushed into lower income brackets over time due to the nature and handling of the pandemic. Reduction in incomes. Pew Research Center has indicated that the middle class in India has shrunk by over 32 million households in the past year. https://pewrsr.ch/2r3j3su. We find an indication of a downward shift in incomes even among a much poorer sample of households. Our survey suggests an over 70% reported reduction in incomes post the pandemic, with many falling into significant precarity. While 55% of households recalled earning less than 5,000 Indian rupees per month prior to the pandemic, around 74% reported doing so in December 2020 to January 2021. It is thus unsurprising that around 30% households were also seeking loans, and among them, at least half of them reported needing loans for food, all indicative of the debilitating food and financial insecurities that poor households continue to face. Migrants on the margins. The second wave of the pandemic comes on the back of an uneven recovery and persistence of crippling food and financial insecurity among the poorest households, especially migrants. Migrants who have traveled to cities only months ago are again traveling back to their villages. In our sample, 74% households had migrant members who had returned to the village during or after the lockdown. In mid-2020, 57% among them had gone back to the destination city by December-January, with 59% of those remaining also wanting to go back. It was the relatively disadvantaged who had not been able to find their way back to the cities. There was limited support for migrants even in existing social protection schemes such as the Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act, (MREGA). For example, among the poorest, households with migrants were more likely to seek work than those without, 43% versus 32%, but less likely to get work, 49% versus 59%, under the scheme. It is clear that households have not had a chance to rebuild, and with many completely exhausting their savings and facing massive debt, they are bound to be more severely hit than last year. In the face of such a threat, including high unemployment that is steadily rising again, the state must ensure immediate, sustained action. Food security is a must. The government has promised to restart the Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, with 5 kilograms of rice/wheat per person per month for the next 2 months. https://bit.ly/3ge4xqq. The government needs to provide similar support for stabler longer periods, expand the current offering to include nutritious foods like pulses, address issues faced in existing schemes such as MREGA, like delays in wages and rationing, and new schemes such as a potential urban employment scheme should be explored. Food security schemes such as ration provided to children through Anganadas, public distribution system and midday meal scheme in primary schools need to be ramped up systematically and urgently. For migrants stuck in cities without work, community kitchens, such as AMA canteens, are required. The most vulnerable will need more predictable and stable support than ever before. Karan Singhal is a researcher, Advaita Rajendra is a PhD student and Ankur Saran is a faculty based out of the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. The views expressed are personal. Thank you. Editorial 2. An idea on taxation that is worth a try. The proposal for a minimum global corporate income tax could be a game changer. United States Secretary of the Treasury Janet L. Yellen's proposal for global coordination of corporate taxation has huge implications. She has proposed a global minimum tax rate. If the major world economies agree and the U.S. Congress approves the increased tax rates, it would constitute a reversal of the trend in tax policies since the collapse of the Soviet bloc 30 years back. Would Ms. Yellen succeed in convincing OECD countries and the U.S. Congress? David R. Malpass, President of the World Bank, representing the interest of global capital, has voiced his opposition. He was shooting from the shoulders of the poor countries when he said the proposal would hinder poor countries' ability to attract investment. The initiative, which has been long overdue, is being forced on the rich countries by the impact of the pandemic. Presently, governments need resources to help people through transfer of incomes, provision of more public services, and also prevent business failures. But their resources have been adversely impacted by the economic downturn. Consequently, fiscal deficits have reached record high levels. In the pre-pandemic era, such levels of deficit would have led to the tanking of the stock markets, but now they are booming in anticipation of demand being pumped in by these high deficits. The result is a massive increase in inequality between those who have gained in the stock markets and those who have lost employment and incomes. Massive deficits in the budget. The Joe Biden administration is proposing a massive $3 trillion package to boost the economy. A large part of this will be spent in 2021, but some of it will be staggered. This will be in addition to the $1.9 trillion package of relief already approved soon after the Biden administration took office. This package came after former President Donald Trump signed on the $900 billion stimulus package in end December 2020 and more than $2 trillion in mid-2020. Thus, in addition to the pre-existing deficits in the budget, an additional 15% of GDP is being added in both 2020 and 2021. These are unprecedented levels. Additional tax collections can help reduce these large deficits, and that is the reason for the U.S. administration's current proposal. But businesses and conservative legislators will resist. However, some rich Americans like Jeff Bezos have supported the idea of taxing the rich more. Such proposals have been around since 2011, when many of the rich in the US and Europe had supported higher taxation on the rich. Warren Buffett had floated this proposal to strengthen capitalist economies after the global financial crisis of 2007-09. Subsequently, this proposal has come up several times. But, instead of raising the tax rate on corporations, the Trump administration cut the highest marginal tax rate from 35% to 21% with effect from January 1, 2018. This gives a hint as to why it is both difficult to raise corporation tax rates and why Ms. Yellen has proposed a global agreement on corporate taxation. When the Soviet bloc collapsed in 1990, nations in East Europe were badly hit and needed capital infusion to overcome their economic woes. To attract global capital, they cut their tax rates sharply. This resulted in a race to the bottom. Nations in Europe were forced to cut their tax rates one after the other to not only attract capital but also to prevent capital from leaving their shores. This had global implications. Nations became short of resources and cut back expenditures on public services and encouraged privatization. Governments lacked resources for education, health, and civic amenities. The developing countries followed suit even though private markets do not cater to the poor. Thus, disparities increased within nations. BEPS and loss of revenue. The world experienced base erosion, profit shifting, BEPS. Namely, companies shifted their profits to low-tax jurisdictions, especially the tax havens. For instance, many of the most profitable companies like Google and Facebook are accused of shifting their profits to Ireland and other tax havens and paying little tax. EU has levied fines on Google and Apple for such practices. Former U.S. President Barack Obama in 2009 had said that the U.S. was losing $100 billion in taxes due to such practices. Since all the OECD countries have suffered due to cuts in tax rates and BEPS, initiatives have been taken to check these practices. But they will not succeed unless there is agreement among all the countries. Any country facing economic adversity can cut its tax rates to attract capital and force others to follow suit. India has also cut its tax rates since the 1990s. Most recently in 2019 the corporation tax rate was cut drastically to match those prevailing in Southeast Asia. Such cuts have implications for both inequality as well as for funding the schemes for the poor and the quality of public services. The regressive tax structure. Another implication of the reductions in direct tax rates has been that governments have increasingly depended on the regressive indirect taxes for revenue generation. Value-added tax and goods and services tax have been increasingly used to get more revenues. This impacts the less well-off proportionately more and is inflationary. Direct taxes tend to lower the post-tax income inequality. The rising inequalities result in shortage of demand in the economy and to its slowing down, which then requires more investment and that calls for more concessions to capital. However, that does not guarantee revival because investment in response to a tax cut is uncertain. Instead, increased government expenditures are sure to raise demand. Global financial capital, which is highly mobile, has effectively used tax havens and shell companies to shift profits and capital across the globe. This mobility has enabled it to extract concessions from countries by making them compete with each other to match the concessions given by another. That is the race to the bottom. So, without global coordination, corporation tax rates cannot be raised. The US is crucial to this coordination. Without its cooperation in agreeing, other countries cannot raise the rates. Now that the US is taking the lead, perhaps this will happen, even though it will not be easy given the clout of global capital and the corridors of power in all countries. There will also have to be cooperation among countries to tackle the lure of the tax havens by enacting suitable global policies. The impact of all this will be far-reaching, impacting inequalities, provision of public services and reduction of flight of capital from developing countries such as India, and that will impact poverty. So, a global minimum tax rate is worth a try in spite of the objection raised by the World Bank President. Arun Kumar is Malcolm Addis Shia Chair Professor, Institute of Social Sciences, New Delhi, and author of Indian Economy's Greatest Crisis, Impact of Coronavirus and the Road Ahead. COVID-19's triage challenge. This time-tested, effective strategy could help tackle COVID-19 but poses unique challenges in India. The second COVID-19 wave has hit India with great ferocity. It's déjà vu and more. Family, friends, and colleagues are infected, hospitals are flooded with patients, there is a shortage of beds, and ambulances are screaming through the streets. There are curfews and lockdowns, and death is in the air. But there is something different about this wave. Apart from the difference in the disease pattern, infectivity is higher and younger people are being affected. A larger proportion of the elite has been infected. In Mumbai, high-rises have been more affected than slums. The elite have been rudely exposed to the dysfunctionality of our healthcare system which the poor have endured for years. The secure world of the privileged has been exposed. Imbalance between demand and supply of healthcare facilities is not peculiar to India. But there is something in our social DNA that could be making it worse. Categorizing patients based on severity. A time-tested, effective strategy to face the challenge of a sudden large load on the healthcare system is the concept of triage. This means that when there are a large number of people needing urgent care and there are limited resources, the victims are divided into multiple categories based on severity of disease. The most severe are treated first as any delay will cost lives. The rest are treated later as per their level of severity. This idea was first introduced by Napoleon's military surgeons to treat battlefield injuries and showed immediate impact. It is now standard practice in many countries when treating mass casualties. It has also been used effectively during COVID-19. But triage is not a sterile, mechanical protocol insulated from its surroundings. Its wide acceptance and implementation are based on the powerful but complex principles of justice and solidarity. It is where the interests of everyone are put above the interest of an individual, where those who need care first are prioritized over those who can wait, irrespective of who they are. It works when there is social consensus on a level playing field. Right from the first wave, Mumbai has witnessed a rather unique effort by the municipal corporation to set up a single-window portal of helplines for hospital beds. For the first time, this includes both the public and private sector. There is, of course, an inherent bias in that the public beds are free but the private ones are paid though the charges are capped. A tiered system of observation, oxygen, and ICU facilities is in place on paper. However, a few weeks ago, a rather exasperated municipal commissioner of Mumbai said that the system is under strain because people are insisting on private hospital beds. It would be unfair to fault a new commissioner for a duality that has been cultivated over the years. I doubt whether many of us would easily use a public hospital today. After all, by design or habit, the sanitized world of private medicine is what the privileged have inhabited for years. Moreover, it is hard to remember any senior bureaucrat, politician, or even doctor who has chosen to be treated in a public hospital in Mumbai for COVID-19. Even as the municipal commissioner was complaining, asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic people such as Sachin Tendulkar, Akshay Kumar, and Rashmi Thakore were admitted to large private hospitals as abundant precaution. There are many individuals admitted to private hospitals because they fear that they won't get a bed if they need one suddenly. Serious triage doesn't only prioritize the sickest over the less sick. It also discourages futile treatment for the very sick who are unlikely to benefit from the treatment. Thus, a 90-year-old who may be otherwise bedridden could be refused admission, or someone with an advanced untreatable cancer who develops COVID-19 may be put lower in priority. It's the same principle of justice applied in the reverse. Executing triage in its truest sense is a big collective leap and needs a certain social sanction. It needs to be perceived to be fair and transparent. The person who gives up a bed does it with the understanding that as and when she really needs it, she will get it. Everyone falls in line towards a greater common good. Challenges. In an unequal world, however, the challenges to this idea are immense. In India, a social triage based on class, caste, and other hierarchies is everyday practice. Also, whatever the severity of the crisis, it is hard to imagine a determined neutral state implementing a strict triage. Finally, given the current dominance of the private sector, especially in intensive care, triage has to involve state control over the private sector. But if there was ever an opportune moment in this nation's history to muster courage to implement genuine triage, it is now. Sanjay Nagral is a Mumbai-based surgeon. Protecting the police. The special insurance cover of 50 Indian rupees lakh must be revived and extended to all frontline workers. R.K. Vij. Before the police could get fully vaccinated, the second wave of COVID-19 hit India more severely than anyone could have expected. Curfews and lockdowns have been imposed again in some regions to break the chain of transmission, but the challenges for the police are more varied and serious now. Challenges for the police. Last year, most of the problem was limited to migrant labor following the nationwide lockdown, providing them ration, transport, and interstate passes. The pandemic being the first of its kind for the current generation, the police faced a tough time enforcing the rules that came with various lockdowns. The punishment for violating COVID-19 protocols and lockdowns was kept mild. The police had other challenges too. There was a spurt in cases of cyber fraud, particularly those relating to online purchases and phishing. The Supreme Court, in pursuance of a suo motu petition, in re. Contagion of COVID-19 virus in prisons, 2020, instructed high courts to decongest prisons in the wake of the COVID-19 outbreak by releasing convicts on parole and under trial prisoners, charged with offenses punishable with maximum punishment up to 7 years, who were in jail for 3 months or more on temporary bail. Except for a few instances of criticism here and there, the police received appreciation for its perseverance and sympathy for others. The situation appears to be more fearful and grimmer this time. With the steep spike in cases in just a fortnight, the number of hospital beds, ICU beds, medical oxygen, and drugs seems to be short of the rising demand. Though the administration is trying its best to defuse the situation by coordinating with various stakeholders, panic in certain pockets doesn't appear to subside. The role of some media persons and social activists needs special mention here, as they have kept the hopes alive for many desperate people by extending a helping hand in time. Another area of concern has been the disposal of bodies by the state authorities as per COVID-19 protocols. This is sometimes delayed due to the limited capacity of cremation grounds. Relatives are not able to bid adieu to their loved ones and perform their last rituals. Their agony is beyond redemption. Facing the brunt. Needless to say, apart from healthcare workers, of course, the brunt is being faced by the police, whether it is in tackling the menace of people hoarding scarcely available medical products or maintaining public order in front of hospitals. In addition to enforcing lockdowns and maintaining order, the police continue to perform their regular duties as well. In case an apprehended criminal is found COVID-19 positive, he needs to be quarantined before being produced before a magistrate. In heinous offenses like murder and rape, arrests cannot be deferred. According to the prevalent jail protocol, criminals are permitted entry only if they test COVID-19 negative. The probability of policemen who are effecting arrests catching the infection is very high. So, for a policeman, being safe while being on duty is becoming difficult. Many policemen have succumbed to COVID-19 and numerous others are getting infected while helping others. According to a tweet on March 16, 2021 by the Indian Police Foundation, 1,207 security men, including policemen of the state police and Central Armed Police Forces personnel, have died of COVID-19 and more than 2 lakh have been infected. Their families also remain at a higher risk. The scheme of special insurance cover of 50 Indian rupees lakh, notified for the medical fraternity last year for a limited period of 3 months, must be revived and extended to all frontline workers, including the police, this time. The challenges during the second wave of this pandemic have increased manifold. But despite facing various hardships, the police consider themselves fortunate enough to have been entrusted with the solemn duty to serve the needy and poor in difficult times. R.K. Vij is a senior IPS officer in Chhattisgarh. Views are personal. Thank you. Other important news. Center-controlled truth, not pandemic, says Rahul Kang. Pitches for uniform price of vaccines across country. Special correspondent, New Delhi. Former Congress President Rahul Gandhi on Monday alleged that though the Narendra Modi government had failed to contain the pandemic, it had managed to control the truth of the pandemic by manipulating the data regarding COVID-19. As in the case of employment and development, the government is not allowing the actual data about corona to reach the people. They may have not been able to control the pandemic but managed to control the truth about the pandemic, Mr. Gandhi tweeted. Ahead of the May 1st rollout of vaccines for every adult in the country, Mr. Gandhi, in a separate tweet, said all citizens of the country should get vaccine for free and India should not become a victim of the BJP's system. Speaking to The Hindu, former Rajasthan Deputy Chief Minister Sachin Pilot said the central government had failed to make state governments stakeholders in the fight against the second wave of COVID-19 and suggested that Mr. Modi convene an all-party meeting to prepare a concrete roadmap to fight the pandemic. Mr. Pilot said the current crisis was a result of bad planning by the central government and alleged that after centralized decision-making during the first wave, it has left the states to fend for themselves as things spiraled out of control. He said the central government needed to take blame for the ongoing chaos, unavailability of oxygen and life-saving medicines, and the lack of capacity building since October last year, when COVID-19 cases were coming down. They should introspect and think what is going on. Crematoriums are full, people are burning bodies on the road, and what you see simply wrenches your heart. History will judge which leaders are spending taxpayers' money on advertisement and self-promotion as opposed to building capacities, getting medicines, hospital beds, and oxygen beds for the sick, Mr. Pilot said. For all these months, should we not have stockpiled all these vaccines in such quantities where we could have covered the entire country in a few weeks? This is a national crisis and we should have a stakeholder approach where scientific inputs are taken. State governments should be brought on board in terms of deciding, allocating, and combating, he added. Arguing for a one nation one vaccine price fixed by the government instead of pharmaceutical companies, Mr. Pilot said, if there is a clamor on May 1st and people don't get it, it would not only create frustration and disappointment, but can add to the prevailing sense of chaos. India and Japan resolved to jointly fight the pandemic. Modi, Japanese counterpart hold telephonic conversation. Yoshihide Suga. Special Correspondent NEW Delhi. India and Japan on Monday resolved to fight the pandemic jointly, a press release from the Ministry of External Affairs announced. The observations on COVID-19 featured during a telephonic conversation between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Japanese counterpart, Yoshihide Suga. The two prime ministers also reviewed the status of ongoing initiatives like the Quad, involving Australia, India, Japan, and the US, and pledged to complete bilateral developmental schemes. Overcome challenges. They highlighted the importance of close India-Japan cooperation to overcome these challenges, such as by working together to create resilient, diversified and trustworthy supply chains, ensuring a reliable supply of critical materials and technologies, and developing new partnerships in manufacturing and skill development, the Ministry of External Affairs said. Japan is currently under strict measures aimed at containing the pandemic, which has also intensified in an unprecedented manner in India, prompting assistance from several foreign partners. Over the last year of the pandemic, both sides have assisted stranded citizens who were unable to return home. The two leaders agreed to continue with such cooperation. A statement from the Japanese side highlighted Tokyo's commitment to a rules-based free and open international order. Bilateral cooperation. The two leaders confirmed the importance of Japan-India bilateral cooperation and multilateral cooperation, including the Japan-Australia-India U.S. quadrilateral cooperation, towards realizing a free and open Indo-Pacific, said a statement from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Japan. Mr. Suga also expressed serious concerns about China's movements in the East and South China Sea. The two leaders discussed possible cooperation in areas like 5G, submarine cables, strengthening of industrial competitiveness, diversification of supply chains and development projects in the northeastern states of India. The two prime ministers also took note of the steady progress made regarding the construction of the Mumbai-Ahmedabad high-speed rail. Modi, Biden discussed COVID-19, U.S. aid talks stressed importance of smooth, efficient supply chains of vaccine raw materials, medicines, p.m. essential supplies, a shipment of oxygen concentrators from New York being unloaded at the Delhi airport. Pti. Shriram Lakshman, Washington. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and U.S. President Joe Biden spoke on the phone on Monday to discuss the COVID-19 outbreak in India and U.S. assistance to the country. The conversation comes a day after Mr. Biden and some of his cabinet members publicly expressed solidarity with India, and the U.S. government promised assistance to India in its fight against the pandemic. Had a fruitful conversation with POTUS at Joe Biden today. We discussed the evolving COVID situation in both countries in detail. I thanked President Biden for the support being provided by the United States to India, Mr. Modi said on Twitter. Their conversation also underscored the importance of smooth and efficient supply chains of vaccine raw materials and medicines, the Prime Minister said. TRIPS initiative. Significantly, a readout of the call from the Prime Minister's office, PMO. also said that Mr. Modi informed Mr. Biden of India's initiative at the WTO for a relaxation in the norms of the agreement on trips to ensure quick and affordable access to vaccines and medicines for developing countries. A group of 10 senators had written to Mr. Biden earlier in April asking him to support a temporary waiver of intellectual property rights at the WTO that would enable the production of COVID-19 therapeutics, diagnostics, and vaccines around the world. The White House readout of the call does not mention the TRIPS initiative. The president pledged America's steadfast support for the people of India who have been impacted by the recent surge in COVID-19 cases, the White House readout said. President Biden conveyed solidarity with India and affirmed that the United States was determined to support India's efforts by quickly deploying resources such as therapeutics, ventilators, and identifying sources of raw materials to be made available for the manufacture of Covishield vaccines, the PMO readout said. The Prime Minister mentioned India's commitment to contain the COVID-19 pandemic globally through Vaccine Matri, and its participation in COVAX and the Quad vaccine initiatives, as per the PMO. Mr. Modi and Mr. Biden agreed to remain in touch and directed their officials to coordinate closely on the COVID-19 issue, the PMO said. Lack of resources. The telephone call came in the background of not just flagging of supply chain issues with the US with regard to vaccines but also the lack of certain resources in India to fight the pandemic, as the country has been hit by exponentially rising cases and deaths. Subtle shades of Dharma. Draupadi raised a legal point that had to be settled when she heard that Yudhishthira had lost her in the wager and that she was henceforth a slave to the Kauravas. Throughout, Draupadi maintains that she has not been won legally by the Kauravas and that she is not bound by the outcome of the game of dice, pointed out Sri B. Damodara Dikshitar in a discourse. First of all, the entire game was not valid on many counts. It was a plot to entice Yudhishthira to play against the veteran Sakuni, instead of Duryodhana. Everyone knew that Yudhishthira had no chance of winning. She could not understand how anyone could have pledged his wife in the game. So she wanted to know if Yudhishthira had lost himself first and then offered her or whether he pledged her first and then offered himself as the bet. But before she could get an answer, she was dragged to the court. Even in that desperate situation, Draupadi put forth her arguments to the entire assembly fearlessly and appealed for basic justice. How can the assembly allow such a dishonor to be perpetrated against women who are to be treated with respect? Is there no one present to put a stop to this atrocious act that forebodes disaster for all? She proclaimed that when the elders in the assembly, who are the custodians of truth and righteousness, fail to uphold justice, they lose their right to be honored and venerated. She then asked Bhishma, well known for his wisdom and learning, to clarify whether she was a slave. Bhishma said that he was at a loss to give a proper answer to her question since the subtle shades of Dharma are difficult to analyze. One cannot gamble someone after he has already lost himself. But there is also the fact that a man has right over his wife. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here to listen the news. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all.